If you're jumping into the Monster Hunter Wilds beta test, excited to try out the game, play against the new monsters and just have fun with the game, then this video is for you, as I will talk about things to pay attention, details that you might not have noticed or realized were there, a few changes and key things to take note of. We'll start off with a more broad scope and get into the nitty-gritty details as we go. With that being said, hello everyone, my name is Dark Hero, hope you're enjoying the beta test and let's get into it. So this beta test is actually going to be separated into two different time slots, which I think a lot of players have forgotten by now. The initial time slot begins on February 7th and goes up until February 10th, then we get a 4-day break and the beta resumes on February 14th, going until February 17th, which is just 11 days before the release of Monster Hunter Wilds. This beta test is going to feature crossplay right off the bat and people will be able to play with each other, and you're even going to have the option to have private lobbies if you don't want to matchmake with anyone else or have them in your hub, as that was one of the more common complaints. Now, as for your character, you'll be able to carry over your character customization along with your palico customization from this beta test into the full release of the game, but you won't be able to carry over any of the actual progress. But it should be noted that if you played the previous beta test, you'll be able to carry over the progress of the beta test into this one, so you can go straight into the new content right away. It's also noteworthy to mention that both the PC and the PlayStation performance has been enhanced, with specifically PC actually having lower minimum requirements for the beta test. On screen now you'll be able to see the difference between the previous minimum requirements and what they are actually listed as right now. So hopefully we won't be running into any more Dorito monsters, but a huge detail that should be noted is that this is not the final build of the game, not even close to it, and as such, there's not going to be huge optimizations for the game. This is actually pretty much the same build as the previous beta test, with some key exceptions, meaning that your performance shouldn't drastically improve over the previous beta test. But of course, because Capcom heard a lot of people asking for it, they went ahead and developed a benchmark test that actually allows you to test with the right optimizations that the final version of the game is going to have, how well your PC is going to be able to run Monster Hunter Wilds on release. And that is before we start getting any sort of optimization mods and any of that stuff. So go ahead and download and run the benchmark test if you haven't done so already. It takes 5 minutes. And you can even tweak around with a few settings to find out what exactly is going to be the best for you. Now, of course, the biggest thing and what you might have been watching in the background from the beta test is that we get to hunt two brand new monsters. Well, one of them is actually a returning one, and that is none other than the bird wyvern Gipsaros and the flagship monster of Monster Hunter Wilds, Arkveld. I was honestly hoping that Capcom was not going to allow us to hunt Arkveld before the game released. I know that is what Capcom typically does with their demos, but I wanted to keep the surprise for the game's release. That being said though, now that I have hunted Arkveld a couple of times, I think that he is a phenomenal monster. He's a lot of fun and you really gotta be careful with his grab and some of his big AoE attacks, and even if you're careful, you only have a 20-minute timer to actually hunt him in the beta test, so if you're not being aggressive and punishing his attacks that leave him vulnerable to then use a focus strike to deal a lot of damage, like the big attacks where he slams down his chains with dragon energy, if you don't punish those, you're going to be running out of time, but that is a very fun challenge and I like it a lot. Honestly, he might just end up becoming one of my favorite monsters. Though if I were to compare him in difficulty to other flagship titles that we got in similar demos and beta tests, I think Arkveld is easier than Nergigante, Valkana, Magnamalo, and especially Malzeno. But maybe that's just my experience. I'm not saying that Arkveld is easy, I actually failed a quest quite a few times, though most of them I simply ran out of time because of the 20-minute time limit. But of course, that's the thing with these beta tests, they're supposed to be a big challenge for you to defeat them within the time limit, because you don't have access to powerful weapons or powerful armor sets with good skills. And this is honestly one of my favorite moments in a community when people are trying to solo clear this fight with all kinds of weapons, even the non-speedrunner part of the community, because everyone is on an even playing field. Because when the game releases and you start getting all kinds of crazy weapons and armor skills, and especially the RNG decorations, which we don't really know how that's going to work with Wilds, it can become a bit hazy because you can go with different builds and that can lead to a very different fight, whereas here in the beta test you are a lot more limited, so if you manage to accomplish a shorter time compared to someone else with the same weapon, it is purely due to skill. But of course, it's all a fun competition and nothing that should be taken too seriously, though I do enjoy seeing what what speedrunners do and what kind of tech they are using, how the Japanese speedrunners tackle the encounter versus the Western speedrunners, and what are the big differences in the speedrun timings between the different weapons. As I talked about before in a previous video, they are not necessarily an indication of how powerful a weapon is, but at the very least they are a way to measure the ceiling of a weapon in the hands of a very capable player. Now, one cool thing about Arkveld that I think not a lot of people might have spotted is that when you actually go post the quest for Arkveld, it states him as being the chained Arkveld specifically. So there might be a new version of Arkveld that we fight later on, perhaps an unchained Arkveld, which is much more powerful and has a more expanded moveset. And if that is the case, then I'm totally fine with getting to fight him here before the game's release. Again, I think he is a lot of fun, and the same can also be said about Gipsaros. He is a fun returning monster that I think is going to catch a lot of people, especially new players, off guard with his unique mechanic of faking being dead. I just think that he doesn't deal enough damage compared to the previous games, but maybe that's just me. I mean, it's a Gipsaros after all, he's not a real threat. That being said, I do love what they did with Gipsaros, where while he is charging up his flashing move, you can actually interrupt it by doing a focus strike because it becomes a wound. So you have a lot more counterplay against being blinded by his big attack, especially if you're using a weapon that doesn't have a shield, and I think it becomes a lot more engaging and much more fun. And honestly, these wounding mechanics, especially the dynamic wounding that you get from certain attacks from monsters, is one of my favorite aspects of Monster Hunter Wilds combat that we have had so far. Now, I do want to mention that we actually get to go to the training area for the first time in this beta test. It was not available in the previous one, which was a huge pain for me to record a lot of the weapon demo videos for you guys. But if I want to test out some combos, showcase the weapon for you, or if you just want to try out a weapon for yourself, you can go there and have fun with it. Now, on that note, a very important thing to mention is that none of the weapon changes that have been shown and listed in previous updates, like for example the insect glaive now being able to bounce back in the air, the improvement on the hit stop animations, and some specific changes to sword and shield, longsword, and many other weapons, none of those weapon changes are going to be present in this beta test, because again, this is pretty much the same build as the previous one. So that is a bit sad, but I'll have a lot more to say about these particular weapon changes in a future video, so please stay tuned for that. I promise you it's going to be a good one. And of course, because it has been a long time since the previous beta test, remember that you can always take out 2 weapons with you, that the food buffs no longer expire after a single quest, and instead last a certain amount of time, so that you can roam around the open world, go through multiple quests, fight a bunch of monsters, and the food buffs are going to be active throughout the entire duration, even if you cart. Also, something that I see people forgetting about a lot in these beta tests is that you can actually go around just exploring the map and gathering some materials to craft items that you might think are not available in the beta test, like tranquilizers to put monsters to sleep and capture them. On that note, I'm going to be making a dedicated video talking about some small details that I think might have eluded a lot of players, you know, those small little interactions that you rarely come across. But on that note, I do want to ask you guys if you would like to see some more weapon demonstration videos from the beta test from me. Again, I have a lot more coming about the weapon changes, but I figure I should ask this because now that we have the training area available, it's a lot easier for me to showcase a weapon and their combos properly. So if you're interested in that, let me know. Ultimately, I want to say this, have fun with the game, but don't burn yourself out on the beta test. Monster Hunter Wilds is just around the corner, and even I myself, someone that has been playing Monster Hunter since I was 8 years old, I'm not gonna rush it and spend another 50 hours into this beta test when the game is just around the corner. I will potentially hunt Arkveld with every weapon. I think that could be a fun challenge, but again, I don't want to burn myself out, as I do want to have the best content available for you guys when the game releases. With that being said, I want to say thank you all so much for being here. I hope you are all as excited as I am for Monster Hunter Wilds, and as always, my name is Dark Hero. Thank you very much for watching, and happy hunting!